We might kick off. Thank you so much to all of you who've joined today. And I'd like to welcome you to the latest webinar in Grant Thornton's consulting webinar series. This episode is focused on what life sciences, the future looks like, and a focus on digitalisation and opportunities within the sector. My name is Fiona Dunn. I'm a director and lead for our Life Sciences Working Group in our consulting team here in Grant Thornton, and I'm delighted to facilitate the event today. This is the latest webinar in our series since the Future of Healthcare Focus on Sustainability event, which was held earlier in the year. I want to welcome back those of you who attended our last webinar, and also a warm welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. Today is about the topic of life sciences in Ireland and abroad. In particular, we wish to discuss the challenges and opportunities that companies face in the current climate, how digitalisation can have an impact for organisations by driving commercial value and enhancing day-to-day operations. And in recent time, we've seen significant advancements in technology in this sector and many companies here in Ireland, which our panellists are going to speak through today. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. We have an expert panel of speakers for you today, including Matt Moran, who's a director at Biopharmachem in Ireland, Kieran Dunn, who's a director of strategy execution at MSD, and one of our previous business consulti alumni here from Grant Thornton. And they're both going to share their insights and thoughts on the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for the life sciences sector. From Grant Thornton, we have Donald Cronin, who's going to give his insights into the work that we in Grant Thornton provide to organisations to support them in their digital journeys. And the whole event will be facilitated by myself. There'll be an open discussion and Q&A at the end of the presentation. And we'd really welcome everyone as we're going through the event to pop in any questions, or if you have any points that you'd like to raise, and we will raise these at the end. So to kick off, I might hand you over to Matt, who's going to speak to the current landscape and some of the challenges across the life sciences industry. So, hi, Matt.
Hi, Fiona. Can everyone hear me okay? Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you, Matt.
Thanks for the introduction. And I'm actually the former director of Biopharmachem Ireland, as I retired officially last week, but delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be able to share the industry strategy, which as an organisation we launched last year, and hopefully it'll serve the purpose of setting the scene for the meeting. And congratulations to you on picking this topic, because it's very relevant for the industry. So this plan was published in 2022, launched in the USA and in Europe, and what it does is it deals with some of the trends that we see for an industry, and I'll finish up this short presentation by, I suppose, highlighting some of the trends we consider important for the sector. Next slide. The document, the strategy document, the title is to make Ireland the global sustainable leader in biopharmaceutical and chemical manufacturing. And it speaks to the needs for the industry to be both sustainable and also digitized. So maybe the next slide, please. All right, the vision that Ireland will be the globally recognized centre of excellence for innovation and development in sustainable manufacture and supply of biopharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals and chemicals, and be the location of choice for the launch of new products. That vision is quite important, and it emphasises the need that for Ireland to keep in a leadership position with this industry, we need to be always the location which is used for taking new molecules to market or taking them from the clinic to market, whether they be small molecules or large molecules. So that really funds the innovative engine that drives the industry in Ireland. Next slide. So the mission of Biopharmachem Ireland, which is part of IBEC, is to support the sector in realising its vision. And what it does essentially is it brings together the industry with its stakeholders, that's industry, government and the research community, to ensure that it as an organisation can support the vision of making Ireland still one of the leading locations for the manufacture of pharmaceuticals and chemicals. Next couple of slides, then I'll address, I suppose, some of the key facts about the industry. Next slide. So profiling the sector, as you know, it's a very important industry. Significant amount of exports leave the country, over 100 billion euros. Obviously played a very important role during the pandemic in assisting the supply and manufacture of the COVID-19 vaccine and associated therapeutics, which helped obviously to bring society through the pandemic. So I think that what was interesting, I think, about the industry, which can be fairly low profile, was the profile of it rose significantly as people realized the importance of medicines in helping life, and in the case of the pandemic, the importance of medicines or the vaccine in allowing us to recommence society and recommence our economy. Interesting to point as well that during the pandemic, this industry stayed completely operational. So all facilities in Ireland stayed operational right the way through the pandemic. Next slide. Significant amounts of capital investment are still going into the ground. You've probably heard recently of €1 billion investments being made by MSD or Merck. Also a €1 billion investment being made by Pfizer at its Grange Castle facility. And I think a second 1 billion investment announced by Merck recently at its Dunboyne and Carlow facilities. Employs around about 45,000 directly, which gives you an employment impact of over 80,000, closer to 90,000. And interesting also to note that there's about 50 FDA approved facilities operating in Ireland, and the levels of compliance of the industry are very important in ensuring that we stay competitive. I think Ireland is renowned as being one of the locations for the highest levels of quality or compliance in the world. And this is very important when it comes to winning new investments, because obviously reliability and ability to supply the market is incredibly important for this industry. And therefore it's very important that companies comply with and meet the requirements. It's a highly regulated industry. Next slide. As I mentioned, compliance is very important. Also, we employ a significant number of third level graduates, and over 25% of all PhD researchers are employed in the sector. Depending on the state of play in terms of mergers and acquisitions, this industry tends to change. There's around about 19 of the top 20 global pharma and biopharma companies are based in Ireland. That changes. But the message there is clear that Ireland is recognised as being a leading hub for this industry, and in fact is the third largest producers of pharmaceuticals in the world. Next slide, please. In terms of the footprint of the industry, significant footprint in Dublin, a significant footprint in Cork, and we see emerging footprints developing in both Waterford and also in Athlone. And you've probably heard recently Eli Lilly, who have a large campus in Kinsale outside Cork, announced the construction of a new biotech or large molecule manufacturing facility outside Limerick. And again, they will be investing €1 billion in that, and I suppose brings the cluster to Limerick. Typically, the Midwest of Ireland is renowned for medtech, but we're now seeing the development or evolution of some pharmaceutical manufacturing there as well. And it's interesting to note that government tends to favour regionalisation of this industry, so you will see new investments emerging throughout the country. Next slide, please. Collaboration with the third level sector, whether universities, is very important for the industry, because they provide the skills to work in the industry, but also they allow companies to engage in more development type opportunities, which helps to reinforce the manufacturing base. So we promote the concept of development plus manufacturing, where you try and co-locate development of new products and also the manufacture of new products, which allows you to bring the molecule to market more quickly. And given that this industry is manufacturing products generally on patent, that time can be essential in terms of recovering the value to pay for research. So if you look at that map, you'll see that there's an overlap between where the clusters are. And we would obviously work directly with some of the research institutions there, for instance, NIBRT, which is based in Dublin, and then the SSPC and the PMTC, which are both based on the campus of University of Limerick. Next slide. I spoke about the capital investment, and that's just a sample of some of the most recent investments and these are still ongoing. So we're seeing investments being added to those, and it's really a who's who of the pharmaceutical industry, from Lilly through Janssen, MSD, Amgen, Takeda, so on and so forth. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, Biopharmachem Ireland launched a strategy in 2022, and working closely with their member companies, they identified 6 pillars which they would use to inform how they conduct business and how they advocate for the industry out from 23 to 27. And the wheel, which you see on the slide in the presentation, summarizes those. So if we start at, I suppose, 1 o'clock on the slide, you see industry stroke pharma 5.0, and that's particularly relevant given the topic of today's webinar, that this talks about the importance of applying digitisation to the sector, which traditionally would have been known as Industry 4.0, but viewing this through a human-centric lens and also taking into account the need to be sustainable, we come up with the concept of Industry 5.0, which is currently being championed by the European Commission and has been taken as a strategic theme for the industry here. Skills and talent at 3 o'clock, incredibly important for this industry. As we continue to grow and prosper, it's important that we have the appropriate talent base to support that. War on talent is a global issue for the pharmaceutical industry, and one of Ireland's key advantages is that we have a significant and skilled labour force here, and it's important that we sustain this and grow it. Active pharmaceutical ingredients, this, as you know, is the part of the molecule that confers therapeutic effect to the medicine, and this is a sector which is starting to grow again, and a lot of it is been facilitated through the emergence of a quite a vibrant contract development and manufacturing sector, which is at 11 o'clock on the wheel there, CDMO. And it's interesting to note that many traditional contract manufacturers have gained a place in the Irish industrial network through acquisition of existing captive API facilities. So, for example, you would recently have seen Sterling Health, a UK-based contracting organisation, acquiring the original Novartis API facility in Cork, where they've joined Hovione from Portugal, who acquired the Pfizer API facility, and then Thermo Fisher, who acquired the GSK facility, and also then Korean-based contract manufacturer SK Biotech a number of years ago acquired the old Bristol Myers Squibb facility in Swords and have now been investing significantly in that. Global business services is growing quite rapidly in the industry as well. And this is where companies choose to concentrate initially treasury type financial operations, but recently have expanded that into organizations to support clinical research, clinical trials, so on and so forth. So you see companies such as Eli Lilly and Pfizer, so on and so forth, establishing large GBS facilities in Ireland. And from an Irish perspective, it's very important that these align with the manufacturing, because that gives you, again, further competitive advantage, and also gives you the opportunity to attract new functions into the country. And finally, then, advanced therapeutics or cell and gene therapy is the future of pharmaceuticals. And this is, I suppose, an area which is attracting significant investment in the US and also in Asia. And it's where you're looking at applying new therapies such as gene therapy, CAR T, towards meeting unmet medical needs. And it's, again, an opportunity for Ireland. And recently, NIBRT announced the opening of a wing specialising in cell and gene therapies at their research centre in Dublin. And I think this is an opportunity for Irish companies. You see companies such as Takeda who've already established a stem cell operating facility in Ireland. Next slide. So that's the strategy, and those are the things. So what does the future bring for the industry and for the country? Advanced therapeutics, I've mentioned already, and at the moment, it's uncertain as to how the manufacturing base that will support that will develop. So there's an opportunity for Ireland to be involved in that. Given our capability in the manufacture of monoclonal antibodies, or what are normally known as biotech products, we should be able to support this type of activity. Again, there's also opportunities for Indigenous companies, and we've already seen APC VLE, which is an Irish company based in Cherrywood in Dublin, establishing a significant contract manufacturing and research facility for advanced therapeutics. And they are doing a lot of business in the USA at the moment, and they are very successful. And I think it gives an opportunity for other companies to follow their way. Supply chain challenges, and I suppose the role of digitization in that, which is very important. I think the pandemic served to, I think, magnify or accentuate how delicate supply chains in this industry can be. And as you know, in many cases, the supply chain is global, and it could be the component, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, it could be the regulatory starting material, it could be packaging components. They're sourced elsewhere in the world. And during the pandemic, we noticed that this supply chain did fracture, and this caused shortages. And in some cases, key intermediates or key active ingredients were not permitted to leave their source of manufacture, and this prompted shortages within the industry. So how the supply chain is managed, how it's controlled, is a challenge, and I think it's a challenge where digitization will help. And the other issue, and it's in the third bullet, is this whole idea of sustainability, our carbon footprint, and I think the commitments which have been made by many of these companies to reduce their footprint to zero by 2030, 2040, which is a very aggressive commitment to make by a company. And through Biopharmachem Ireland, they have established a lighthouse to look at this and to see how this could be achieved, again, using the Pharma 5.0 concept. So companies are actively looking at digitize and also then be more sustainable, reuse materials, reduce the carbon footprint, access renewables, and in some cases, pharmaceutical manufacturers have developed their own renewable base on site. So you would see companies such as MSD and Eli Lilly establishing some of the largest solar farms in the country. And previously, companies such as J&J have established on-site wind. So this helps companies bring down their carbon footprint, reduce the amount of carbon that they emit to the atmosphere, but also it makes the operation more cost-effective in that you're generating your own power. Talent, I've spoken about, quantity and quality. And given the theme of this meeting, will we have the right talent base to support digitization of the industry? These are different people, and in many cases, they don't exist. When companies seek to implement digitization plans or strategies, it's important they have the people to work there. So there's an opportunity for companies such as Pharma who work in that space, for NIBRT to work with industry to come up with new courses and new ways that people can work. Affordability of medicines is, I think, an existential challenge for the industry going forward, not just here, but also in the USA. And digitization can play a role here, that it can make the discovery of medicines more cost effective, and also it can make the manufacture of medicines more cost effective, even implementing advanced concepts such as artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. An interesting, again, a problem or an issue which arose during the pandemic was the ability of third world countries to manufacture medicines. There was much made of access to a patent, but that really wasn't the issue. The issue was that these countries are unable to make the medicines and supply the medicines they need to support their own populations. So again, an opportunity for a country such as Ireland to help and to provide capability here is important. And finally, I suppose this is a question which I'll just leave hang. Are we prepared for the next pandemic? I'll hand back to you, Fiona.
Thanks so much, Matt. You've set the landscape really well for the rest of the presentations. Probably before we move on to Kieran, I might just touch on two themes that you mentioned in your presentation that are separately, but are probably closely interlinked. You mentioned CAR T-cell therapies and, the growth of that across Ireland, and also touching upon the affordability of medicines. And obviously with CAR T-cells being a real challenge for governments at the moment in terms of how expensive they are. How do you see that playing out over the next decade or so? And what would you see might be solutions maybe on the government side and potentially on the pharma side, that those solutions which are so groundbreaking and innovative, that there will be a path to market for them, and with affordability in mind?
Is that to me?
Yeah, that's you, Matt.
That's a good question, Fiona. I think that ultimately where government comes in is it does need to support innovation, and it needs to support the supply of these medicines. Currently, though the medicine could be approved in Ireland, it may not be made accessible to patients here. So that's one point. And patients need to have access to these new advanced therapeutics. And from a manufacturing perspective, if the country is asking companies, many of whom are members of Biopharmachem Ireland, to manufacture advanced therapeutics in Ireland, they need to be made available to Irish patients. I think that's a bit of a no-brainer. So that has to happen. So we need to align our policy with regards to supply of medicines and also manufacture of medicines. In terms of the cost, I mean, affordability will always be an issue, but I think what you need to do is take a value-based approach and look at the ultimate value to the healthcare system of, at the end of the day, therapeutics which can actually impart cure to some of these diseases. So ultimately, there will be savings to the healthcare system if you apply this. So I think taking a more holistic approach and taking, I suppose, a whole of life approach towards it certainly should inform policy from a government perspective.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Matt. I will hand over to Kieran next for his presentation. He's going to give us some insights based on his role in global drug discovery and also in strategy execution of his insights into digitalization across the life sciences industry.
Thanks very much for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to present on the topic. My name is Kieran Dunn. I work with MSD and I'm a member of the Enterprise Strategy Office. My background is in enterprise strategy, execution, and then also data and digital innovation in drug development, which I'll be talking about today. So prior to working in life sciences, I began life and management consulting, and Fiona mentioned earlier that I used to work with my friends in DT here as well. So I know that Donal will talk a little later about digital transformation. So I think it's worth making a distinction between digital transformation and digital innovation. So at a high level, digital transformation is organization-wide, it's larger scale with a high impact, and it's typically more of an evolution over a longer time frame. And then digital innovation, on the other hand, has a narrower focus. So it looks at new solutions, essentially starting small with the ambition to prove value and then scaling to other parts of the business. So typically this is a much shorter time frame as we're doing experiments to try and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then if we zero into this topic of digital innovation, there's this concept of the 70-20-10 rule. So the idea here is that organizations are encouraged to spread their innovation time across different types of innovation activities. So first up being the 70% core innovation, this is typically enhancing what you already have. So it's typically low risk and just incrementally improving what you have. The 20% on adjacent innovation is more looking at things that are working outside of your organization and then bringing them in. So this is looking potentially at peers or other industries. It's a bit riskier, but it's still relatively low risk to something, as these things are typically proven somewhere. And then finally, you've got the 10% transformational innovation. So this is looking more to create something completely new, and it's typically more disruptive and higher risk with a higher fail rate. So my experience over the last couple of years has been mainly in this 10% transformational innovation is what I'll focus on today. So I think for any project, and not just digital innovation, it's really good to think, if not pivotal, to think about your priorities. So firstly, what are your organization's priorities? Do you know what they are? Second, of those priorities, which ones do your leadership care about the most? And then of those, which ones can you or your team realistically impact? Because we don't have the time or the effort to go after everything, and it's really important to be focused. For this slide, there's a huge amount on this, but it's just a flavor to illustrate that the top 2 or 3 things will really change from organization to organization. They'll change from leader to leader and from situation to situation. And ultimately, depending on the environment, they can even change over time in terms of the hierarchy, which ones are more important and which ones aren't. So then my focus over the last number of years has really been in drug development, and I think it's really interesting to look at this standard research and development value curve. So across the page here, we've got time on the x-axis, and then we've got positive and negative cash flow above and below that line. So early on, we can see that cash flow is negative because we're spending money on research and development, we're investing in products and assets. And then we move to a launch phase where hopefully we break even and we start generating revenue. And then after that, we move into commercialization, where we start becoming a lot more cash positive. And that's the ideal. But the question is, how should we be looking at moving this curve? And typically you want to move the curve up and to the left. And moving the curve up essentially means try to minimize your cost and to try and maximize your revenue, whether it be the total revenue or peak sales or market share. And then if you're moving the curve to the left, you're looking more at getting products to market faster or ultimately hitting your peak sales earlier. So trying to change the slope or the steepness of that curve. And then thinking about the priorities, in this case, drug development, what are the kinds of things that we can impact, or what are the levers that we can use to increase value and move this curve? So if we better understand those, well, then we know where we can focus and we know where we can deliver the most impact. I think it's really important to be aware as well that not all types of impact are created equally. So the benefit of investing funding in one area of impact will not be the same as investing in another. So typically, if you provide a leader in drug development with the option of reducing cycle times or accelerating to market, they will prioritize that 9 times out of 10 over reducing costs. It has an outsized impact on what you can do. So having an awareness of these and having an understanding of how they're prioritized in terms of hierarchy is super important. So then to give you an idea of what this looks like in drug development, here's a bunch of different examples of different types of digital innovation. So it's not an exhaustive list. There's no particular order to this. They're just ideas. But the point is, there's a lot of things out there, and they're all at different varying stages of maturity, and they go through different cycles. So to call out some examples, to the left, we can look at trial optimization and digital recruitment and DCT. This is where we might use these innovations or these initiatives to look at delivering trials faster, ultimately accelerating time to market. And then on the other side, we can look at maybe AI or machine learning to try and identify better targets or maybe improve the probability of success of an asset. And then there might be other options to introduce automation or NLP to reduce cost and maybe increase efficiencies. And one of the points here as well is typically you can't do everything. There's a lot out there. So organizations really need to think about their priorities first, figure out what's most important or where the biggest opportunities are, and then figure out where to place the bets in terms of these transformational innovation programs are. So with transformative digital innovation, it's typically very risky and it typically has a high failure rate. So more will go wrong than will go right. Most things will fail. So like a lot of problems, I try to think of things through the lenses of people, process, and technology. And then with so much uncertainty in the innovation space, you really need to think about that people aspect as much, if not more than anything else. So early on, you need to figure out who to include. Have you got the right people? But you also need to think about not including too many. These projects are better off being nimble and small. You need to set high expectations for what you're doing, but you've got to be careful about the risk and your credibility. And initially, it can be tricky to get attention for these ideas and it's hard to get momentum, but it's even harder to stay relevant over time, particularly when organizational demands can change. And then on the technology side, you really need to understand the risks of going down this path and what could go wrong and figure out how to manage that. And you really need to understand and avoid underestimating complexity. These are tricky problems. If they were easy, they would have been solved before. So it's good to keep that in mind. And then ultimately, you need to prove the value. In innovation, you need to do that quickly and you need to do it incrementally, piece by piece, and build as you go. But you've got to really stay focused on that value. And then this one in the bottom right, in terms of the rapid technical advances, it's an interesting one that I've experienced over the last few years, which is things move really quick. Technology is evolving super fast, and there may not be a solution for your problem today, but that doesn't mean that there won't be one in the next 2 years. And is it really worth investing in innovation spaces where that might happen? Very difficult to predict, but definitely worth considering. So in terms of using a practical example, I've been spending the last 5 months working on generative AI projects in drug development as well. So for context, for those who aren't familiar with it, ChatGPT was launched last year, November. It's the fastest growing app in history with 100 million users in the first 2 months. It's a pre-trained AI model that's trained on a vast amount of data. And instead of retraining or fine-tuning that model, you generate outputs using prompts and other means. And it can do a lot of different stuff. It can create new content. It can generate summaries or insights or analyses or translate content or complete tasks. And just to give an idea of how fast this space has moved in the last year, so ChatGPT was launched on the 30th of November, 2022. And then there was a slew of products that were launched really quickly after. So we have examples here from Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Salesforce, and a bunch of others. And this was all in the first 5 months of that product being initially launched. And I think it's worth touching as well here that it's not just the models that are changing, it's how we engage those models. So every day, every week, there's different approaches, different innovations to how to engage with those models to produce better or more complex outputs. And then thinking about how we had to tackle this early on, we started small and we expanded from there. But very initially, you need to think about understanding and aligning with the direction and appetites of the organization. So this is back to the priorities piece. And in our case, we had executive sponsorship and a clear remit and a clear target of what we need to do. We needed to identify whether we could secure value or not and present that to the board of directors in October. So it was quite a quick turnaround. We had about 2 months to do it. But that focus and that support really made our lives a little bit easier, and it also provided budget, which isn't usually the first step. But then once you know what you're going after, it's really important to align support. So I'd recommend building a community or a coalition of sponsors and champions. So typically in a project, people engage a single sponsor or maybe 2 sponsors. I'd really encourage people to think a lot more broadly. So start thinking across domains as well. So who are the groups or who are the people who can speed up your progress or who can slow it down? And really bring them into the conversation and understand any concerns if they have some. But the main point here is to engage broadly and widely and have as many conversations as you can. Engage, engage, engage. And then you need to be selective about what you target and then prioritize aggressively. So source ideas from a wide variety of places. It could be top down or bottom up. So it could be from leadership and problems they've been thinking about for years, or it could be bottom up from process experts. But it's also worth engaging with your peers in industry. Think about other industries as well, see what's happening out there. And ultimately, not everything should be done. You need to be very selective. So lean back on those priorities and aggressively deprioritize things. And where possible, try to quantify whether that's benefits or costs, and time to value as well. So then once you're up and running, it's important to get the right people involved. I'd highly recommend standing up a small action-focused cross-functional group. So typically there's a tendency to get a big group of people together, and I'd avoid this as much as possible. You want a nimble, small team that can move quickly. And typically you'd want to include people with the knowledge, experience, and ability to make decisions, but also influence people, particularly senior stakeholders that you might have identified in step 2 above. So in our case, we had a group of about 6 to 8 people with subject matter expertise from across business, stats, IT operations, which opened the door to architecture and infrastructure questions, security. We also engaged our Center of Excellence for Artificial Intelligence from a design perspective, and we brought in some external people with subject matter expertise in generative AI. So the point here is a small, diverse group of people who can act and move quickly. You don't want passengers in a team like this. It's got to move quick. And then in terms of scope, you want to start small and build. So this is that idea of moving incrementally. This is really, again, focusing on the realization of value. So you need to earn the right to proceed. You need to demonstrate progress incrementally. So in our case, really, step 1 was to understand, can these models produce anything like a human in terms of quality of output? And then as we started getting better at that, we expanded into other areas. So we started looking at UX and UI, looking at other features, looking at more complex prompt engineering. And since then, we've a more, I suppose, a better suite of a product in terms of looking at generative AI models performing different tasks in agent architectures. So for search, for gathering insights and references, looking at evaluation, looking at writing. So this was combining these things. The main point here was to start small, prove value, and then build piece by piece. So then to take a step back, I think there's a few questions and pointers which I think are important to digital innovation, but also projects in general. So first one, is it worth going after? What's the so what in terms of the problem you're trying to solve? And does your leadership care? The second thing then is, do we understand the risks and can we accept or mitigate those risks? So are we going into this with our eyes open, and are we managing expectations well enough with those key stakeholders? Number three, how can we maximize the probability of success? Do we have the right skills, the right experience, expertise, and support to make progress fast? Have we included the right people, whether that be at a sponsor level, but also in the doing level? And then four, continuously reflect and reassess. So be transparent with your stakeholders. Things tend to change very quickly, and it's really important to be honest about your ability to deliver. So people often have a tendency to hide or gloss over challenges, and these things typically get found out quite quickly in these innovation projects, and your credibility is key. So for this particular piece of work that you're working on, but also the ones in the future. So it's good to be transparent and credible. And then always focus aggressively on the realization of value. So I mentioned this before, you need to earn the right to proceed bit by bit. The focus should always be on value, whether that's value for the patients, for your colleagues, for the business. And it's really important to understand if this is going to fail, then fail fast. It's easier to do that than to have a harder discussion and pull the plug further down the road after you've wasted time and money and effort. So then, in conclusion, I think digital innovation, it can be really risky, it can be stressful, it can be messy, it can be frustrating, but it's also a lot of fun. And it's a great opportunity to make an impact and implement change where maybe there hasn't been change for some time. So I really recommend if anybody gets a chance to get involved in these things, get stuck in, you'd learn a lot, and it's never ever boring. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kieran. Some really good insights there for organizations going through their digital innovation transformations, and really interesting journey that you've been on with MSD in the AI space. So really appreciate you sharing. Definitely a few things I want to pick your brain on in the Q&A. But in the interest of time, I will hand over to Donald Cronin from our business consulting team. He is going to speak to digital transformation and some of the ways that Grant Thornton can support organizations in their digital transformation journeys. Thanks, Donald.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, so Paddy, you're controlling the slides, so I might just ask you to move on when we need to. But yeah, delighted to be here today. So as Fiona mentioned, my name's Donald Cronin. I'm a manager here in Grant Thornton. So I've been working a number of years with life science companies, and particularly with digital transformation. So I'm delighted to be able to talk about my favorite topic today. I just wanted to start with a quick definition of it, because basically with digital transformation, there's a lot of different interpretations of what it is. So depending on who you ask, you'll get a different opinion. So you can ask 100 different people for a definition of it, and you'll get 100 different answers. If you ask someone in IT, you're probably going to get a more tech-focused answer. If you ask someone maybe in HR or in your change management function, you're probably going to get more of the people side of things. But really, digital transformation, it combines everything to do with your organization. So it's the culture, how the business operates, and the digital side of it. So leveraging digital technologies and processes, and using people to the best advantage as well. So I just wanted to start with that, because a common mistake I've seen with different projects or different companies, they think it's a digital transformation project, but in reality, people are just implementing a system in isolation, and not thinking about everything that surrounds that. So if you go about implementing just a system, you don't think about the people and processes, your scope is pretty limited, and the benefits you're going to get from that project are pretty limited as well. So it's only really when you combine everything around digital, so the people and the processes and the structures, will you actually fully get a transformative project and get the full benefit from digital solutions. So if you could move to the next slide, please, Paddy. Brilliant. So I just wanted to start with this and maybe demystify some of this kind of terminology here around, Industry 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0. I'm not a huge fan of those labels. Just for the record, I think they're starting to get a little bit more kind of out or irrelevant, I think, as we move into kind of the future state. But really just wanted to call that out because at the moment, you'll all be aware that we're in 4.0 or Pharma 4.0 at the moment, and it's very much focused on tech and digital, automation, robotics. But really, like that's always going to be with us going forward. So you see where we got the different revolutions like 3.0, that ended quite clearly, and now we moved into 4.0. But digital is always going to be there. And there's always going to be AI coming in the future. There's always going to be automation. To Kieran's point, there's going to be innovation constantly. So even though I've listed a few of the different technologies below there, that's going to get added to constantly throughout our lifetimes. There's going to be new technologies developed. There's going to be new things added to those lists, and digital's always just going to be there. 5.0, and I'll touch on a little bit more about it later. It's kind of where the industry is shifting the focus from purely digital to focusing on people. So that's the people in your organization, but it's also being more patient-centered. So more focus on the actual patient-related outcomes. But yeah, as well as the people in your organization and sustainability that Matt mentioned as well at the beginning. So more focus on climate. And like those things, when you talk about 5.0, it sounds like it's off in the distant future, but it's really starting now. Like sustainability is very much on the agenda. People have a more focus on people. Organizations have a more focus on people, given the war on talent, as Matt says. Trying to retain people. So that's beginning. That's not a future problem. That's actually something that's happening now, and I really see these merging together and being blended, 4.0 and 5.0. And I'd like to hope that we actually get rid of those labels completely and kind of abandon those, because really you're always going to have digital, you're always going to have people. So the two go hand in hand, and it's how you actually leverage it so that the digital aspect of it is augmenting people's roles. So it's supporting them in their manufacturing roles or whatever roles they have in the organization. But then you've also got people supporting the technology. So people in monitoring roles or development roles, data roles. So the two go hand in hand, and I would like to see the 4.0 and 5.0 are blended going forward. And personally, I would like to see the labels maybe possibly be removed, but that's basically, I just want to demystify some of the terminology that's out there in the industry with that. So Paddy, if you can move to the next slide, please. This conscious the sun is beaming in here and it's going to shift slightly. So well, sticking with the current labels that are out there in the industry, you have Pharma 4.0, the operating model. So this is the ISPE's definition of it. There's 4 different elements. You've got resources such as the workforce that you have in your organization. You have information systems, big data, how you use it, how you access data, how you have it drive your manufacturing processes, the organization itself, and the processes within it, and the culture, which is a mixture of leadership, but also people right through your organization. The 2 key callouts for me on this one is basically your 2 enablers. Enablers/blockers. You got digital maturity and data integrity by design. So really, I think when people talk about AI, Internet of Things, and leveraging all that technology, there is also the need to take a pause and be realistic and assess your organization and its ability to actually adopt those technologies. So I mean, it's fine if you are building a new site, greenfield site out somewhere. From scratch, you probably can adopt a lot of these technologies and have them in mind as you design your manufacturing site. But in Ireland, a lot of our infrastructure is quite old. You'll have buildings that are 30 years old, 40 years old. A lot of life science companies may have taken over previous food manufacturing plants and converted them. So that has to be taken into account that, do you actually have the infrastructure to do it? If you've got big thick walls that, separate your different rooms, like is the Wi-Fi strong enough to actually have Internet of Things driving data in your manufacturing process? Is that actually possible? Can you rely on that accuracy of the data 100% so that you're meeting regulations and compliance and quality standards? It's something that kind of gets forgotten about, I think, in the rush to go digital and the rush to use all these new technologies coming. It's just something that needs to be considered, because the alternative is it may be better just to lean out your processes, So, if you've got an old manufacturing plant that you can't avail of all these technologies, you actually may be better off leaning the processes that you have and doing what you can, as opposed to making huge investments, in AI or robotics that mightn't actually give you the benefits that you think you might get from them. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just breaking it down, I suppose, digital transformation into 3 different layers. So we have the planning side of it, which is focused really on strategy. So it's, again, kind of back to my previous point, a lot of people think they're doing digital transformation, but really it's a project. It's just a system implementation. They might be implementing an ERP system or an MES system and maybe labeling it as digital transformation, but it really needs to be formed part of a much wider strategy. So you've got the digital strategy, but it also needs to feed into your business strategy. So the 2 really need to be aligned so that your digital transformation is actually driving the objectives of the business. Otherwise, it won't be a success, or you mightn't get buy-in from leadership. So it really does need to be tied to your objectives and thought out, over the longer term. In terms of implementation, so yeah, this is where the guts of your project's going to happen, or your transformation program. So it's basically assessing not just one particular area, but all your integration points. So anywhere where data is feeding in or out of your systems or your manufacturing processes, anywhere where you can align your processes to the digital solution is key. So you want to put a huge focus on that, and it needs to be managed quite strictly, but again, aligned to your strategy. In terms of enablers, and I will touch on each of the enablers in the next few slides, but basically they are data and business intelligence, technology, people and culture, and partners and supply chain. So data, yeah, really just how you get your data, where's your source of truth and how you actually get insights from it. Technology, do you go with maybe some of the vendors the popular vendors that are out there, maybe for an MES system or ERP, or do you go bespoke customized software? People and culture, again, how does your culture of organization, how is that going to adapt to automation, for example? It's going to obviously be quite disruptive, so that needs to be managed carefully. And then partners and supply chain, just your whole entire ecosystem. So who are your suppliers, your warehousing and distribution, also interdepartment as well. So next slide, please. So just touching on data and business intelligence. So this is kind of a tried and tested method that we'd use here in Grant Thornton in our BI team. So we use this quite frequently on projects. So basically stepping through the process of actually producing goods. So if you're producing a medical device or APIs or drugs, and you're using data behind all of that, it really starts with the collection of data. How are you actually collecting it? Can you acquire all the data that you need? Cleaning it and storing it, analyzing it, and then you need to, once you've got it analyzed, it needs to be produced in the visual format, so that leadership and management, can buy into it and quite clearly see the data and get insights from it, and then that drives your decision making in the organization. Once that's done, that's not the end of the process. Once you see the data and it's driving decisions, you look back on that then and review it and make improvements to it, and then monitor that process. So I just want to put here in the middle as well, just the pyramid of wisdom, as it's called in the industry. So it's just different stages of data really, and what you get from it. So basically you have data, you've access data, you can see it, you can see what's going on in the organization. That's really just the first step. Then you're getting information from it. You might have an ERP system that you're able to pull reports from, you're able to see your data, get information back. But there's much more from that. Then you have to move into the next stage where you're actually getting insights from that, and you're getting knowledge from the data that's in these systems that you've just implemented. And then the future state then is wisdom, where you're actually really getting ahead of the curve. Maybe it's using AI or machine learning, and you're actually using it to change your business or your operations. So that's pretty much it on data. Paddy, if you can move to the next slide, please. On the technology side, yeah, I just wanted to briefly run through this. I know Kieran touched on it as well. So when you're looking at your technology, you do have the options out there. There's a lot of popular vendors, like doing MES systems or SAP or ERP systems, and organizations are challenged with whether we'll go with a trusted vendor or can we do it ourselves in-house as a bespoke software. application, and just some of the implications that I would have seen from industry and that we would have seen on several projects that we've run in GT. Going with customized software, you do have to acknowledge the length of the project and the complexity of the project. So you really are getting into more extensive development lifecycle, obviously, but then your validation is probably going to be bigger. You've a lot of unknowns with your product. You need to test a lot more. You need to do much more rigorous validation, and the training aspect of as well. So if this is bespoke software, you're going to have to develop that documentation. You're going to have to roll it out, and you're also going to be responsible for maintaining that and improving that continuously, so that's up to date. Whereas going with a vendor, an out-of-the-box kind of solution, can often have benefits when it comes to timelines. So you've basically, your process there really is to understand the software that you've acquired, or that's coming out of the box. Validate it. Your validation effort is probably going to be less because it's a proven system that you're implementing. So there's less unknowns in it. And then you've got your training and education as well. It will be simpler because you're not starting from scratch. So just some considerations there when it comes to managing a project and how you choose your technology, whether you go with a vendor or in-house customization. So if we can move to the next slide, please. On the people and culture side, again, often overlooked when it comes to digital projects or digital transformation projects, but really is a key aspect to it, and it can be the making or breaking of a strategy or the goals of an organization. And one of the methods that we have here that we use quite often in Grant Thornton is the ADKAR model. So basically just identifying the different kind of awareness levels of people in your organization. So typically life science organizations are pretty complex. Sorry, I just want to keep an eye on time. We actually are nearly towards the end of it. But essentially, you're going to have multiple functions: engineering, IT, operations, quality, R&D. So you have a lot of different people from different disciplines. A lot of them will be at different stages of understanding your strategy or your digital transformation. So using this model, you can actually properly assess the different stages of understanding that people at different employees in your organization are at, and align your change management and your communications plans to that, so that you're actually getting the most benefit out of it and bringing the people along with you. I'll just move to the next slide. And apologies if I do run through these a little bit quicker than normal. We are running out of time and I want to keep time for Q&A. So this is basically your supply chain, how you actually, what data you get back from your suppliers, how you interact with them, and analyzing, each of your touch points, so that it's a fully integrated ecosystem to deliver the full benefits. I might move on to the next slide again, Paddy. And I think you can skip this one as well, just in the interest of time. This is the recap. So again, on Industry 5.0, it's that shift again from purely digital thinking like AI, machine learning, robotics, and moving more towards people-centered, so that's people in your organization, and also patient-centered. It also touches on climate and sustainability. So again, just my earlier point, these are all things that you can start doing now. They're not projects or initiatives that can wait 5 years' time and then you'll start looking at them, in the future. If you're implementing something right now, like an SAP or ERP system, MES system, or anything digital, really, you need to start thinking about the people side of it now, and getting the full advantage, so that as you're setting it up and you're going on that journey, you've got your people alongside with it, and it's not just an afterthought, in the future. So, really I see 4.0 and 5.0 blending, and I don't really see 4.0 ever ending. I think 5.0 will just blend into it, and it can start now on the people side of things. Can I move to the next slide, please, Patty? Yeah, again, just recapping, I know the guys mentioned on this earlier, people, process, technology, without any of the three of these things, your transformation isn't going to be a success. And, it needs to incorporate all three. You need to bring the people with you along the journey. Your processes need to align to the technology. Otherwise you're not going to get the full benefits from your transformation project. I think that is the last slide. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, thanks again. And I'd like to hand back to Fiona now.
Thanks so much, Donald, for a really comprehensive presentation. I don't see anything come through on the Q&A yet on the chat. So I might just kick off with a couple of questions that I had, some of the points that the speakers touched on. So firstly, this one is directed to Kieran, and if anyone on the call wants to pop any questions as we're talking through, please feel free to. But it's around the 70-20-10 model that you presented, and deciding between, you know, the different types of innovation like core, adjacent, and transformation. Kieran, how would you go about deciding that, or potentially quantifying the benefits of each type of innovation, especially if the impacts might be quite different for different innovations?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think I'd probably separate those two things out into two different things. The buy and build question is a bit separate to how do you quantify the benefits. So if I tackle that one first, I think personally, you'd always buy whenever you get a chance, even if it's not perfect. Reason being is that to build something, or even to take something off the shelf and to over customize it, it just causes a huge amount of effort in terms of project time, implementation, but then also the ongoing maintenance of that over time. So I'd actually introduced two other things. And in my previous organization, we looked at it this way. We looked at it from a build, partnering, and buying. And then more recently, with the way that things are moving so quickly, I'd even include wait more often. I think there's a huge amount of investments made in innovative technology, with a lot of it failing and with a lot of products coming out further down the line, that you actually would just be better off not putting the time and effort into 2 years and the funding to try and build something new, when you could just buy it the next year and not have to worry about the maintenance and operations of that. So I think I would always prioritize buy if you ever have the opportunity. That's the first one, and only really customize or build at a last resort. Easier said than done, but that's my advice. In terms of the benefits piece, really depends on those priorities that you're going after. So I think first step, maybe try and baseline where you are today, and it's like a typical process improvement project. Try to figure out where you can change and how. So that might be, you know, minutes and hours of someone, which could be translated into FTE or a dollar amount on that side, but it could also be used to calculate productivity, like doing. So in our organization, we'll be increasing the number of trials we'll be doing. So we don't want to change our headcount, we want to do more. So that's one of the levers that we try to pull. And then ultimately things like accelerating to market, trickier to understand what's on the critical path, but you're quantifying based on days and weeks. But ultimately, the key point I'd make is really work with your SMEs who know these processes, because they're thinking about these all the time, and ultimately align with their leadership. Make sure that someone's signing off, because there's loads of great ideas, but when you bring it to a leader and say, right, can we take $1 million out of your budget next year? Typically, they hesitate. So that should be a really useful exercise in terms of that prioritization.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Kieran. Just in the interest of time, I might just ask one more question to Donal. It's around digital transformation projects, and I suppose with the landscape of pharma and, you know, mergers being commonplace, I just wanted to get your steer, Donal, on digital transformation projects when pharma companies are going through M&A activity, with digital solutions already in place. What's the best way for them to navigate that journey?
Yeah, M&As are probably one of the biggest projects you can do, and probably one of the most complex that you can go through. I suppose you could probably host a session on it on its own, but I suppose to focus on digital side of things. Really, if you've got two companies merging together, I suppose starting from the top down, you do need to align the strategy early on, so that you have a clear vision of what your strategy is, a combined one, and what the objectives of the digital strategy are. In terms of data and technology, I think it's key that you when you're doing this, that you end up with one single source of truth when it comes to data. So that involves harmonizing the different systems, you know, that you've got in both companies, in both entities, and standardizing them, and that you end up in a place where there's just one source of truth. You've clear data governance policies in place. You've clear, you know, overall governance in place as well, just to not only, you know, for the longer term, but to actually guide you through the transition itself. And again, just not to overlook the people side of things, that in people on a journey, these types of activities can have a huge strain and frustration. And if you're mixing, you know, if you're merging digital solutions there as well, that you do need to get buy-in. So communication of it is hugely important as well as the data, and having that correct. yeah, again, we could host a whole session talking about it, but I think just making sure that single source of truth, that you're working on, you're relying on, and that you're meeting your regulatory standards as well through that, and bringing the people along the journey.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Donald. We just had one question come through in the Q&A for Matt. It is, how can biopharma companies meet broader patient needs rather than overemphasizing already crowded areas with the greatest economic returns?
Question.
That's quite a broad one for you. That's a challenging one to finish up on.
I mean, to be honest with you, Fiona, it very much depends on the capability that the company has. I mean, they often they'll pick a platform to specialize in, whether that's oncology or immuno-oncology, so on and so forth. And that tends to drive the research. As you know, research and discovery of a drug is a very expensive and time-consuming business. So they don't tend to flip. I mean, they make decisions and they operate over very long timelines. So, they'll pick disease areas and that they'll use that to drive their research. And also, just to finish up, as you know, also discovery of new entities is a very, very uncertain business. And just for the purpose of this, I mean, you are seeing companies now utilizing machine learning and artificial intelligence and trying to assist them to be more focused in that regard.
Yeah, and it probably touches on your point earlier, even in the cost savings of CAR T-cell treatments in the long run. I think even governments moving towards that outcome-focused reimbursement will act as an incentive as well for pharma companies
Sure, yeah.
to move to meet broader patient needs too.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a complex business, and you are seeing some companies now emerging to support what they call the life cycle of the drug or the life cycle of the therapeutic. And then it gives you a bit of a handle then on, how much does it really, where is the value? And I think value is really what you need to focus on when it comes to medicines as opposed to cost. I know you could call that semantics, but it's really value, which is what the patient is seeking. I don't think the patient is too fussy as to how that's achieved, but they need their medical need met, and the industry needs to focus on the best value prop.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. I'm conscious that we have run 5 minutes over now. So if anyone on the call has any follow-up questions that you want to share with us, we can reach out directly with the speakers and coordinate those. I'd really like to thank Matt, Kieran and Donald for the really insightful discussion today and their time, some really valuable insights. And thank you, the participants, for attending and engaging with the discussion. Our team will be in touch over the next couple of weeks to provide any follow-up material on the discussion today, and we welcome your feedback or any follow-up questions that you have on the event. And if you'd like to keep an eye out on any upcoming events and webinars as well, we hope to see you all again. So thanks again to all our panelists, and hopefully we'll see the participants again soon.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.